Okay, so I have two theories for why Nintendo is going to be bringing more consoles to Nintendo Switch Online. It could be a big shock, or it could be one console instead of both of them. But the first theory is Nintendo's Twitter has been really, really blowing up with Metroid Dread stuff, as it should be, because that game is insanely hyped and is coming out fairly soon. However, a lot of the Metroid Dread stuff is really focusing in on the story of Metroid, and part of that story is, of course, Metroid Fusion. So there are a lot of tweets that Nintendo refers to, talking about Samus's story, talking about playing the games, talking about revisiting the memories, and they usually show timelines or do like a spotlight on a specific game. And for all of the games, so Metroid NES, that has been remade and is available on Virtual Console. It's on Nintendo Switch Online. It's very accessible. Super Metroid, also extremely accessible. You can play that on a ton of hardware, including the Nintendo Switch, just like the original Metroid. Metroid 2 has recently been remade as Samus Returns, and that you can play on the 3DS, which sold millions and millions and millions of units. Very affordable, very accessible game that you can play very easily right now, as well as it's fairly easy to get a hold of the original. However, Metroid Fusion, that game came out almost 20 years ago now. It came out almost 20 years ago. It's never been remade, and it's only available currently on the Virtual Console for the Wii U. So it is like by far the most inaccessible Metroid game. But it is the latest Metroid up until Metroid Dread. It's the latest game before Metroid Dread in terms of the story. And Nintendo has been making a big deal about how the story matters in this game. There's going to be story ramifications, story implications, and you should be caught up on the story. Is kind of what they've been going with since the game has been announced, really. So why would they be doing this? Why would they be doing highlights on a game that you realistically can't play? Like, you would think that they would either make it available or that they would kind of gloss over the game as not be important for the Dread story. It seems like they're assuming that it's going to be very important because they're doing direct tweet highlights and stuff like that. So that's theory number one, right? As a build-up, a hype build-up, and this is around the time when Nintendo would launch a new console for the Nintendo Switch Online service. Around the launch of Metroid Dread, call it September, when we would get the other consoles, the anniversary of Switch Online, you drop Game Boy Advance support, you drop Metroid Fusion onto this platform, Nintendo Switch Online, with Game Boy Advance support now, and everyone is able to play Metroid Fusion, which is the direct prequel to Metroid Dread, and get super hyped for that game. They're going to have a month to really sink their teeth in, really get excited for Metroid Dread, get their pre-orders in, and get caught up with the story. And a lot of people, this game is 20 years old. People who were born the year that this game came out are adults now. Like, this is a super old game. A lot of people have missed out on it. I mean, I happen to have the cartridge, but I'm sure 9 out of 10 of my friends who would be interested in this game do not have the cartridge. So that's theory number one for getting the Game Boy Advance. Theory number two is a bit more, we'll call it cerebral. So if you remember back when they showed Breath of the Wild 2 footage and they talked about Zelda's 35th anniversary, they showed some footage of Skyward Sword HD coming out, and then they showed the Game & Watch Pocket Edition. They said that's pretty much all we're going to be getting in terms of Zelda content this year. They said, in their own words, quote, "We have no additional campaigns planned." I think a lot of people were puzzled by that, especially given all the attention that Mario got. And here's my theory. Last year, when 3D All-Stars came out, not only were a lot of people pissed, but a lot of people were pissed at the timed release of the game, and a lot of people were pissed because of the assumption that at least one of those games, Super Mario 64, would be released as part of Nintendo Switch Online. I am now fast-forwarding a year and kind of taking that same approach. So there's a couple ways to look at this. There's kind of damage control from Nintendo. Maybe Nintendo had a Zelda 3D campaign thing that was going to have Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Wind Waker, just for example. Obviously, it could be a different set of games, whatever. Just as an example. Or just Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask remade, or whatever. So they might have had that planned, but then they saw how poorly the optics went on Mario 3D All-Stars in terms of the timed release and stuff like that. And so they just backpedaled it, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. The alternative is, because they were kind of aware, I think they were aware, and I think we are aware that it would look really bad for Nintendo to have dropped Mario 64 on Nintendo Switch Online a couple months after the $60 release came out. Now that it's been over a year, or around a year, I don't think it would be as big of a deal if it dropped. I think people would not be quite as upset. I think they're kind of keeping those games, the 3D games, Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, off the Switch, off of a purchased plan, so that they can add them to Nintendo 64 online. And in terms of people saying, well, you know, of course they would just make the game cart, a ton of people will buy it. Well, I guess what I would say is there is a lot of development time in making those HD releases, even though they are largely emulated and they were not that great for 3D All-Stars. It does take a lot of dev time. You do have to make a physical product. There's a lot more than just simply kind of dumping the ROMs onto your Nintendo Switch Online emulation service. But they, I'm sure, have done the calculus where they say, all right, if we push Nintendo 64 onto Switch Online, and maybe even we have a higher tiered premium service where you pay like $5 more or something, we can get more subscribers, more $20 or $35 family plan subscribers per year if we add Zelda Ocarina of Time, Zelda Majora's Mask on Nintendo 64 than if we were selling physical games or something, or take the loss on the R&D to make the games. So that's my other theory for the other system. That would be Nintendo 64 with Legend of Zelda, obviously Nintendo 64 games, and we'd probably get the Mario games too, because I think it's been long enough that people would be okay with it. So those are my two theories for Game Boy Advance and Nintendo 64. That's all, and I'll catch you guys next time.